Hello 365 nerds, I'm Zainab, and today what I wanted to talk to you about is the difference in theory between optimism and pessimism. So the theory of optimism actually came before the idea of pessimism, and it was theorized properly by a guy called Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz. I hope I said that alright, in 1710. And from what I can gather, there are four main points behind his theory. First of all, we live in the best of worlds. Second of all, the universe is constantly improving. Third of all, there is a reason behind everything. And fourth of all, this means that evil exists to make man better. Now I think what you might be able to tell from this is the fact that it's actually quite God orientated, and the whole point of this is to show that God knew that Adam would sin, and therefore knew that man would become better through evil. So the whole premise of this belief is the fact that we will get better, but we need evil in order to be able to improve. Now, I think the really interesting thing that came out of this was the fact that Voltaire, who you might know of, wrote a book called Candide ou Optimisme in 1759, which is about 49 years after this. But the really interesting thing about Voltaire's book is the fact that he really doesn't believe in optimism, and the way he shows this is the fact that he has the main character in his story is this man called Candide, and he has optimism almost forced upon him by his mentor, who's a very strong believer in it. But what Voltaire actually wants to demonstrate through this book is the fact that optimism is too optimistic in a way. Like, you can't quite believe that we live in the best of worlds if you just look outside and see the fact that there's a lot of bad things going on. But I think what Voltaire proves in this book with Candide is the fact that we can live much more fulfilling lives and actually make better solutions for ourselves through hard work and good relationships. So I think the main reason why Voltaire doesn't like the idea of optimism is the fact that it's fundamentally rooted in the fact that you just believe everything will be okay, the fact that good will triumph over evil. And I think we see this, we do see this belief in daily life, and I think that's probably why not a lot of people necessarily identify as optimistic, because it can sometimes be seen as blind, because you sometimes just believe that things will be okay. And it's quite interesting to see that it sort of ties in with the idea of luck as well, because a lot of people don't believe in luck, because a lot of people then move on to say that you create your own luck. But I think another interesting thing about Voltaire's book is the fact that he completely doesn't believe in any metaphysical meaning, which means he doesn't actually believe in God, which was why his book was actually banned for quite a while, because obviously it went against traditional belief at the time. Now I think it's quite interesting to look at pessimism, because it came about in 1819, and it was theorized by a guy called Arthur Schopenhauer. Now, what I find really interesting about the actual theory of pessimism is the fact that it's quite a lot worse than you might think it is. Like, you have to go very far to be, especially as pessimistic as Schopenhauer would like to make you believe. Now, what Schopenhauer theorizes is that the world is doomed, and it consists solely of a striving for power. Now, what you see is Voltaire's reality sort of makes you think about a few successes, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you'll believe everything will be okay, but if you work for things, then you will see success. However, if you look at Schopenhauer, he believes that everything is doomed, and he actually goes as far as to say that he would actually push people to accept death and to not have children, and to completely, to give up on their will to live. Now, most pessimists of the time didn't believe that life was meaningless, but they didn't believe it had necessarily any inherent meaning, which means that you can technically be a pessimist, but in some ways be a lot less closed-minded in some ways than an optimist, because you create your own meaning. And I think that's really important too, because if you just accept the meaning that you have, then you don't necessarily think about it enough, and you don't necessarily live a life that others would consider well-rounded. But I do think it's really interesting just to see these three together, and just to see that it's nice to have a middle, but also to see that there are good things you can take from either of them. Like pessimism could be seen as a lot more open-minded than optimism. But that's not to say that it's bad to believe that things will be okay, because obviously if you don't believe that things will be okay, then you believe that you're doomed, and you don't necessarily believe that your life has any meaning. But there's all these things that you can do for yourself, and I just found it really, really interesting to see how these actually came about. Now, I just wanted to say, these all came from this really big book that I got for Christmas, and if any of you could get this book, it's really, really interesting, and I would highly recommend it. So I hope you found this interesting, and thank you for watching. Bye.